Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the APLD California Advocacy Training. My name is Cheryl Buckwalter, and I am the 2021 Advocacy and Sustainability Chair for the chapter, as well as a member of the Sacramento District and the chairperson for Advocacy and Sustainability there. So I want to welcome you all. I am now going to turn it over to Danielle.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Cheryl. And it's really great to be with all of you this morning. My name is Danielle Lynch, and I'm a senior associate at Environmental and Energy Consulting. We are a firm based in Sacramento, across from the Capitol, and we work very specifically with quote unquote environmental organizations who, are working to preserve land, protect it, make sure humans are able to benefit from outdoor spaces, access them, all that good stuff near and dear to my heart specifically. And we've been fortunate to work with APLD California for, what is it now, 3 or 4 years on and off. So super excited to be engaging with you guys once again this year and to kind of kick off 2021 with this training. So before we officially get started, there's a few just administrative items I did want to cover. The first is just know this webinar is being recorded. Just want to make sure you know that up front. Make sure you are muting yourself if you're not speaking. So there is, in case folks aren't familiar with Zoom, at the bottom of your screen there on I think the left, there's a little microphone. So just click that on and off to make sure that you're muted when it's appropriate, just because I think there are quite a number of people here. And then we are encouraging questions, but just due to the size, of the group, we are asking everyone to keep your questions in the chat box. Cheryl will be monitoring that chat box throughout the conversation. So as things come up, if things seem like they should be addressed on time, she'll kind of interrupt me and let me know, and we can cover those throughout the presentation, or we'll also make sure we have time for an official Q&A session at the end. So to get into that, sorry.
Danielle, one thing to add.
Yeah.
If you do need to get up or answer the phone or anything else, will you please turn your camera off? Just because the extra motion and so forth gets to be a little bit distracting, but we do want to see your faces otherwise, so thank you.
Yeah. And then to use the chat box, there's a little kind of message blob icon towards the middle of the bottom of your screen, so click that open. I think automatically it will send your message to everyone, but you can also click the down arrow in case you want to direct message anyone. So if you have a question just for Cheryl that you kind of want to check in with her before, or whatever it might be, feel free to do that direct message as well. But just know that it will auto go to sharing with everyone, so just be aware. And I think that covers the administrative items, unless I'm missing anything, Cheryl.
No, I think that's good.
Perfect. So on our agenda today, we're going to start with some goal setting. We'll talk about the California legislature, how a bill becomes a law. We're going to talk about how to advocate, and specifically, how you individually can do some advocacy during 2021, and we'll wrap up with a Q&A. I'm not going to really go over this agenda too in depth because it isn't important until you actually really dive into it. So to start off with goal setting and what to expect, because I think APLD California and Cheryl and her task force are really wanting to start engaging in policy this year, we thought it would be important to give you guys kind of a one-on-one of what is the legislature, what the heck are they doing up here, how do they make decisions. That way you kind of have a base understanding of how things work, and where the kind of influence points are, both in the Capitol with legislators, but then especially, how you can get involved and how you can actually make a direct difference. So with that kind of base understanding, we'll then talk about how you can actually engage in that work. So this will help you feel more comfortable starting to build relationships with your legislators, telling your story. What are you doing on the ground? Why is that important to your area, to the state, to your legislators? That way you can start informing your legislators about the work that you're doing to hopefully kind of influence them in the right direction when they're faced with different policies throughout the year. So that's kind of what we're trying to cover today. Hopefully that'll be a useful exercise and a useful use of our next 1.5 hours. Jill, you might want to mute this.
Yeah, I'm looking for who I'm hearing. Who am I hearing? Mute yourself, whomever's talking or something.
It's the 818 number. Seems like it's
Here's
stopped
one
now.
right here. Gotcha.
So let's dive right in. So hopefully this is going to be informative. I'm sure some of you already know this information. So let me know if this is, too high level, too low level, but just the basics. Obviously, we have a governor. His name is Governor Newsom right now. He's kind of the head honcho of California politics. He's the one who ultimately makes decisions on, for example, if a bill will or will not actually go into effect. We also have a Senate. Some folks have historically dubbed it the upper house. The Senate has 40 senators who are elected to cover different districts throughout the state. We have a leader of the Senate who is the pro tem. Our current pro tem is Pro Tem Toni Atkins. She has been in a leadership position for several years now in the Senate. Because there are 40 senators, they represent roughly 1 million constituents. That's a very rough number that can be much bigger, much lower, depending on how urban versus rural that district is. But a big constituency, I guess, is the moral of the story. And each of those senators are elected for 4-year terms. Any member of the legislature can serve a total of 12 years. So for a senator, if they wanted to spend their entire time in the legislature as a senator, then they could spend 3 terms. An assembly member, however, who serves for 2-year terms could serve up to 6. And we can talk more about that a little bit later. So that's kind of the Senate. They're in for longer. Their terms are longer. They serve a lot more constituents, and there's less of them. So people tend to call them the upper house because their vote has more power. They're competing against less people, and they just serve more people. They're in for longer, so they tend to kind of know more about politics, since a lot of folks who come into the legislature don't necessarily come from that background. So they're kind of considered the senior house in the legislature. The assembly might fight me on that description, but that is typically how folks think of them. So the assembly, on the other hand, there's 80 assembly members, so double the size of the Senate. That means they serve less people. Their constituency consists of roughly 100,000 people. There is one leader, this is called the Speaker. Our current Speaker is Speaker Anthony Rendon. Again, they serve 2-year terms because you can serve a total of 12. Again, they can serve up to 6 terms in the assembly, but you can mix and match. A lot of times you'll come in as an assembly member, then you'll do 1 or 2 terms an assembly member, and then you'll go try to run for a Senate office. But 12 years total. Then there's the quote unquote third house, which consists of lobbyists. So lobby contract firms like mine, environmental and energy consulting. There are lobbyists who work for a specific organization. So there's folks like, NRDC, who have people who work specifically in their staff who are lobbyists and who advance their, political priorities. And then there are folks like you who aren't paid lobbyists. You don't spend the majority of your time lobbying, but you certainly have the ability and are encouraged to engage in the legislature and in politics, because ultimately, you know, your assembly member and senator needs to represent you and needs to represent your interests. So very general overview of the legislature. An example, so we have Assemblymember Luz Rivas. She hails from District 39, which essentially covers various cities within Los Angeles proper, as listed here. Her term limit is 2028. So she's a relatively new assembly member, which means she has a while to go. So she is able to, you know, she started off strong, but she has a while to go. So someone you kind of want to get to know, who you want to start building a relationship, and someone that, you know, it's worth spending time with, because she has quite a number of years left in the legislature should she choose to, you know, stay in the legislature. She has obviously her office in Sacramento. She also has an office down in Arleta, California, and that's important because there's a little bit of a difference here. So most legislators spend Monday through Thursday here in Sacramento. So they're voting on bills, you know, they're in committee hearings. The Capitol office tends to have staff who work for the Assemblywoman, who work on politics, policy, who are engaging with other members, who mainly focus on legislation and budget, and are really in the weeds and knowledgeable about what's going on in the legislature. So that's kind of the function of the Capitol office. The district office is very different. The district office is going to be one that represents, you know, the local issues, that understands the local issues, that constituents are easily able to go visit and talk to. They're kind of the hub that takes district issues and brings them up and shoots them to the Sacramento office, so that Assemblymember Luz Rivas is able to represent her district when she's making decisions. So a little bit of a difference there for work that you are all doing to talk to your members. You're probably going to want to go to the district office, because that's where you are able to really get tied in, because they essentially have to talk to you because you are a constituent. They care about what you're doing. When it gets to political issues, that's when, you know, you would start talking to people in the Capitol. So more about Assemblymember Luz Rivas. This slide is really meant to capture specific areas of interest and influence that Assemblymember Luz Rivas has. So this kind of tells you about what she cares about and where she actually has direct influence. So starting with standing committees, these are the committees where bills go through. So every bill has to go through various policy committees where there's maybe 5 legislators who are in that committee who have to vote on a bill for it to go through. Those members are considered experts on those issues. So they're the ones who are, you know, tasked with understanding those bills, making the right decisions, and voting on them. So this is a list of all of the committees that Assemblymember Luz Rivas is in. Most notably this year, she became the chair of Natural Resources. This is a big committee, one that would probably be one that APLD California would really focus on. A lot of the things that you care about go through this committee. As chair, she has the biggest voting power, because in most instances, members of a committee don't want to quote unquote roll the chair, AKA vote against how a chair is voting on a bill. So she has a lot of influence in terms of the different policy issues that you all are likely to care about. So she's a very important member. In addition, she's on budget. So this is important because most bills need funding behind it. So she has influence and voting power there. Health, local government, revenue, and taxation, other committees that she's on. So she's also on the subcommittee, budget subcommittee number 3. So this is any budget items have to go through this committee anytime they have to do with climate, resources, energy, and transportation. So again, issues that you all really care about. So there you have, she is influencing and has a lot of power both on policy and on budget. So really a member that you all should be familiar with and hopefully talking to regularly. The last thing I'll say is caucuses. So these are kind of voluntary kind of working groups where you can join different committees that you care about, where they discuss certain issues. They're able to kind of talk to other members, come up with positions on bills themselves. So this is really helping you to understand, what does she care about? So, these are the things I probably want to talk to her about because I know she cares. Or I want to talk to this member because I know this member is on these caucuses, which indicates they care about these issues. So a lot of really good ones here that you guys can kind of go over later. So general interest and influence that Luz Rivas has.
Danielle, what's progressive? The caucus that's progressive?
So they're more of the right-wing Democrats. So they tend to care more about like progressive social issues, environmental issues, that sort of thing.
I see. Thank you.
Yeah. So then why do people make the decisions that they make and what is influencing them? So this is kind of just a flow that I created to help you all understand how you can influence, but then what other influences you should be aware of when you're talking to a legislator. So we're starting off with Assemblymember Luz Rivas. She has her constituents, so ultimately her job is to represent her constituents. So she has to listen to them. She can't ignore your email. She can't ignore your phone calls. That is top priority. That is her number one job, is to listen to her constituents. She has a district director. So this person who is kind of the head of the district office, they're hearing from all the constituents. So this person is going to take all that information, tally it up and say, hey, boss, this is what our district cares about. The majority of them like this bill, don't like this bill. Here's a big thing that needs to get funded in the district. So that's what that person is telling her. Then she has a chief of staff. This is the head person in the Sacramento office. So this person is aware of all the bills that are going through the legislature, all the negotiations, all the politics in the Capitol. So they're making decisions based on what they think needs to happen in Sacramento. What does she need to do to pass her bill? What bills should she care about in addition to her own? What kind of is influencing the politics around how she can get the work done that she needs to get done? So then this next guy over here in the middle is our Assembly Speaker, Assemblymember Anthony Rendon. He also hails from the LA area. He has been our speaker for several years now. So he's technically not her boss, but he is the most powerful assembly member. So she wants to influence him because he gives a lot of, he kind of makes the decisions in the assembly. You can't really get much done if he doesn't like what you're doing or he doesn't like your bill. So Assemblymember Luz Rivas wants to influence our speaker. In addition to her, the entire assembly wants to influence Anthony Rendon. So a lot of people, 80 assembly members, are talking to him, trying to get him to lift their priorities up to be an assembly priority. In addition, he has his own district. So he's not only hearing from all assembly members, he has his own constituency, just like Luz Rivas, who has their own interests, who wants to talk to him, who wants him to push his own issues. And then lastly, he has a policy unit. Because he's the leader of the assembly, he gets a lot of extra staff. So he has very dedicated staff who care about climate, who care about water, who care about transportation, energy, ag. So those folks are all trying to tell him what he needs to do, both for his district, but then for the assembly in general and how they need to get things done. And then lastly, there's Governor Newsom. This seems like an older photo of him. So he is, again, kind of the head of the California legislature. So he has Assemblymember Rendon representing the assembly's interests. And so Rendon is trying to get to him to say, this is what the assembly wants to get done this year. This is what we care about. How can you make sure that these things get done? However, he has the Senate doing the same. So if the Senate and the assembly aren't on the same page, he has to try to sort that out and figure out what he wants to do. He also has what we dub the horseshoe, which are his staff. It's called the horseshoe because they actually sit in a horseshoe here in the Capitol. So he has his huge staff telling him what he should do, informing him about different issues and helping him understand and probably influence his decision-making across the board in the legislature. He also has voters. So everyone across California had to vote him in. And ideally, I think for him, he would get voted again for another term. So he doesn't want to make people angry. He wants to make sure he's delivering on what he's promised and what he ran on, and trying to kind of retain positive feelings for all voters across California. So generally, that's kind of how the flow of influence and decision-making happens across the legislature, or at least an example on the assembly side.
Danielle, did you describe what the horseshoe meant? I know I was asking you about that the other day, so maybe others don't know that term.
Yeah, so if anyone's ever been to the Capitol, there's the infamous bear that you're not supposed to touch because everyone touches it and it's gross. So it's this huge bear on the first floor. So when you go through the doors behind that bear, that's technically the governor's office. That's called the horseshoe. The reason is because his main staff all sit in offices that are kind of in a horseshoe. So the desk and then the offices are like this. So it's the horseshoe.
See.
So a bear and a horseshoe, a lot of animals going on.
Thanks.
All right, so moving on from general kind of legislative interactions and makeup, here is how a bill becomes a law. This is a very, very general flow, just to kind of show you how the process works. So you have a bill. Say APLD wants to sponsor a bill and they say, hey, we want to somehow put into law that you have to use the watershed approach to landscaping. So they say, hey, Assemblymember Luz Rivas, we really care about this issue. We want you to introduce this bill. We think it's so important. It's going to help your district. It's going to help the entire state. It's going to help the environment, wildlife, whatever. Please introduce this bill for us. She says, yes, I care about this issue. This is so important. I get it. So she works with her team to write the bill and then introduces it. So she officially slides it across the desk on the assembly floor and says, hey, I'm going to deal with this bill. I'm going to run this bill. I want this bill to go into law. So it goes into print. It's introduced. That bill has to go through an entire process in order for it to actually go into law. The first thing it has to do is it has to go to a committee hearing or hearings. So as I mentioned, how Luz Rivas sat on all those committees, that bill, depending on what it's about, would have to go through policy committees. And those policy committees are experts and deal with the issues at hand. So it's probably going to go through Assembly Natural Resources Committee, maybe Assembly Water Committee. So there's 5 to 10 assembly members who are able to, who hear the bill, who hear from people who like it, who don't like it. They hear from the author and they're able to vote it and approve it to either come out of committee or not. So they have the first power to say, we like this or we don't like it, this bill is going to live. If they say we like it and a majority of members on the committee vote aye for that bill, it keeps going. So it'll go through, it might go through another committee, it might go through what we call fiscal committees. So if the bill costs money, if the state has to pay for it in any way, it would have to go through a fiscal committee. So it has to go through each of those committees. get voted favorably out in order to keep moving. It can die at any point in that process. So if it makes it through all those policy committees in the assembly, it then goes to the floor. So the floor is technically a floor in the Capitol where all of the assembly members sit, and any bills have to pass out of that floor in order to go to the Senate. So all assembly members vote on every bill that gets out of all of the assembly policy committees. So a bill has to go to the floor. All 80 members vote. Typically, you need a majority vote. So at least 41 members have to say, yes, I like this bill. If they do that, then it moves past and it moves out of the assembly. If they don't like it, it dies. That means it's done for the year. Once it goes through the assembly, you shoot it over to the Senate because it has to go through both houses. Both houses have to approve it in order for it to go to the governor. So it gets through all of the assembly members, it goes over to the Senate, it goes through the same process in the Senate. So it'll go to the committee hearings in the Senate that are experts on that subject matter. It has to be voted out with majority vote out of each of those committees, and then it goes to the Senate floor. So 40 senators each are able to cast a vote in favor or not in favor of that bill, and at least 21 of them have to say they like it and vote yes on it for it to get out of the Senate. So once it gets out of the Senate, if there were big changes to the bill that the Senate made to it in the Senate, it has to go back to the Assembly for concurrence. So they have to say, yes, we're okay with the changes you made in your House because they weren't able to influence any of that. So it goes back to the Assembly floor. They vote on it again. And then if they like it, then it goes to the governor. If it goes to the Senate floor, they didn't really make any changes in the Senate that were substantive. They can bypass the Assembly again because the Assembly doesn't need to vote on it again. They already did, and the Senate did make changes. So if that's the case, it doesn't have to go back to the Assembly. It just goes from the Senate floor directly to the governor. So it lands on the governor's desk. He has a certain amount of days to say whether or not he likes that bill. If he votes or if he signs it and says, yes, I like this bill, most bills become effective starting January 1. So you have a little bit of time to both influence the governor to sign the bill, but also for it to actually go into effect. If he does sign it and he says, yes, I like this bill, that means it's going to go into law. That means it's going to go into effect. And then your work is done. And you can say, hey, we did a great job. Our bill, thank you, Assemblymember Luce Rivas. Now we have to work on implementation, which is a whole other story. But that's kind of the legislative process of how a bill becomes a law. So I'm not going to go over this at all, but just so you know, there are a lot of deadlines. There's a lot of things that have to happen throughout the year through that process. What I just went over was a very, very simple take on that process. So just, this is meant to inform you of there's deadlines you have to hit. So there's just a lot of things that have to happen, a lot of things that you have to do in order to actually get a bill through the legislative process and to the governor.
Danielle,
Yes,
excuse me.
Mhm.
Is this calendar anything that we need to actually be aware of? I mean, is it online that we should just have it, or is it mostly, I don't know, for them to use and more important to them?
Yeah, we use it every day. I can definitely send you a link to it. They have a really cool PDF where you can, if you're like me, have it hanging on the wall. For your purposes, I don't think you need to have it. We will be helping you kind of guide you through that process. If you are sponsoring or working on a bill, it's absolutely critical because there's no kind of automatic function that pushes your bill through every process. You have to like manually make sure everything's happening. So if you miss a deadline, then you're done and your bill could be dead.
Right.
So that's why these deadlines are very important. But I think for what you're all planning to do this year, with, you know, supporting bills and just kind of engaging and talking to offices, I wouldn't overwhelm yourselves with this calendar.
Good. Thank you.
The one thing I did want to say about the calendar is that the pandemic has really impacted how business is done in Sacramento, because we're having to completely change how we do everything. Almost everything before was in person in Sacramento. Lobbying was in person, committees were all in person, testifying at committees was all in person. That's all completely changed. Most everything we do now is virtual. And just like us, the legislature is having a hard time figuring out how to use virtual technologies. You know, legislators can get COVID, and they have. So all of that to say, deadlines are altering. Unlike previous years, they'll frequently say, oh, we're totally changing this, we're delaying all of these policy committees, or we're only going to meet a certain amount of times. This calendar is very kind of tentative, and it remains that way just because every day is a new day in this pandemic that we're in, and it's, you know, something we've never faced before, so they're having to react in real time and come up with solutions as those things happen.
Thank you. Someone needs to mute themselves. Hold on a second. Oh, I got it. Muted. Thank you.
Perfect. So let's go over an example just to kind of make it more real and help us all understand what this actually means. So here's a bill that was introduced a couple of years ago, AB 2470 by Assemblymember Grayson. This bill was authored by Grayson. The sponsor was the California Invasive Plant Council. And essentially what this bill would do is it would create the Invasive Species Council of California. It would identify the membership consisting of, you know, agency representatives, you know, people voted in, who would have decision-making power over that council. It would provide funding for development of a plan related to invasive species, research and studies to better understand impacts and how to, you know, come up with solutions. It would fund inspections to make sure that, you know, where we're saying you can't use invasives, that we're, you know, following through and making sure that in fact isn't happening. And it would create grants for projects that would kind of tackle these issues. So this is a bill that was introduced by Grayson a couple years ago. So for this bill, it went through its whole legislative process. So it was introduced in February by Assemblymember Grayson and his sponsor. It went through a number of committees. So it went through Assembly Agriculture Committee. So those are the members who know agriculture. They voted in favor of it. So 10 members of that committee said, yes, I like it. Nobody voted against it, so good sign. It went through Assembly Water, Parks, and Wildlife next. Again, 15 votes in favor, none in opposition. So it moved on to Appropriations, which is the Fiscal Committee, because it is a bill that would cost money because you would need to fund all the things I mentioned. Surprisingly, 16 of them voted yes. One person abstained. So got through the Assembly committees. It then went to the floor. So this again is where all 80 Assembly members are able to say whether they like or dislike the bill and vote it out of the Assembly. 76 Assembly members said, yes, I like it. 2 abstained. So that bill got out of the Assembly. They all liked it. It then went over to the Senate. So it went to Senate Natural Resources and Water. 9 of the senators said they like it. None of them opposed it. So it next went to Senate Agriculture. 4 members liked it. 1 abstained. So all favorable. So it got shot to the Senate floor. Out of the 40 members on the floor, 39 liked it. 1 abstained. So really great progress through the through both houses. because they took amendments in the Senate, so they changed the bill substantially in the Senate, it then had to go back to the assembly for the assemblies to say, oh, I still like this bill. Yes, you changed it, but we still like it. So 78 assembly members said yes, 2 abstained. So that means it's done in the legislature. Both houses were able to vote and voted favorably. So it then went to the governor, who signed it and said, yes, I like it also. And so he was able to actually sign it into law. Therefore, on January 1st, 2019, it actually went into effect. So just kind of an example of how that all happened. Obviously, it's a lot more difficult than it looks here. But all throughout this entire process, you have lobbyists, you have constituents who are talking to members who are in these committees, who, all the members who are on the floor, they're saying, yes, please vote for this bill. When it comes to Senate Natural Resources and Water, you have a vote in that committee. We like this bill. Here's why. Please vote yes. So that all kind of both influences the votes and why and if legislators favor the bill, but it also very much affects the ultimate language in the bill. So lobbyists and folks like you can say, hey, we like this bill, but here's a sentence in here that doesn't make sense. I don't actually think this is a good thing to have in the bill. Can you change it to this? That's called an amendment. So throughout that whole process, there's an opportunity to improve the bill, make it better, use your expertise to inform different legislators about how they can, change the bill to make it, an even more beneficial bill for the state. So next up is your advocacy opportunity. So using everything you just learned, we can next talk about, how can you actually influence this? How can you get involved? And with that, Cheryl, I think I'll hand it over to you for the next couple of slides.
Okay, great. So first of all, this is just part of the graphic recording that was taken of our first task force meeting, Advocacy and Sustainability Task Force meeting on January 29th. So this will be sent out to the members, and we're working to get it up on our website and so forth. And basically at that meeting and the following, we brainstormed it at that meeting. We listened to what everyone had in mind, or on their minds, really, asking the questions, what does advocacy and sustainability mean to you? And why do you care? And then part of this graphic that's not showing is we asked, what are the challenges, opportunities, and so forth that you see? And so where we are at the moment is everyone is working to select their top 3 areas of emphasis or concerns or interests and that sort of thing. And we'll be having another task force meeting on March 19th, I think it is. I like consistency. Everything, if you noticed, is Fridays from 9:30 to 11. I'm just, anyway. Just a lot of great momentum and things going on there. And one of the things that we did, though, which has been done in past years, is that as of, was it February 19th, Danielle, when all the new bills needed to be introduced. And so what the task force did is we took this long list of bills, and do you want to go to the next slide, perhaps? So we took this long list of bills terms. Everybody gave input because EEC has access to a database, so to speak, where they can enter in these terms, and what comes out is this list of all the bills that had those terms, any of those terms in the bill, and it will say who the author is, the number and title, and then a few sentences, as I recall, summary for each bill. And it seems that unfortunately what we wanted to do, or as it was suggested that I thought was a great idea, was instead of having to say climate change, climate reality, climate this, climate that, could we just say climate and then we'd get everything? But as it turned out, we weren't getting, they did EEC did a test run, so to speak, and we weren't getting, they were very different results. So we went ahead and left all the words in there and all the variations that we could think of. So our task then, and this would be something that, right now, probably the task force and anybody else that wants to participate in reviewing the list of bills that we receive, which should be coming sometime today or early next week, as I recall. But in the future, it would probably be whomever's participating in advocacy and sustainability. But right now we have the task force. So we will get this, and it may be that we divide this up. This is what Robin Salzberg and I had done in 2019. We divided up this list of 50 something bills and reviewed them and said, we're interested in this, this, and this. So we're going to have to hone it down to 5 to 10 bills that we are most interested in. We can always track other bills with APLD National. There is what's called a database called Statescape that we can use for tracking bills. Once a year, National usually gives an orientation to that. So if anybody's interested, let me know. But we've always sent out announcements and inviting people whenever there's that training. But anyway, so we will want to fine tune it and get it down to 5 or 10 bills. And then EEC is going to monitor those for us. And that's a wonderful thing because they're going to be, we've been sharing with EEC what we're interested in. I've shared with them, information from our meetings and videos and so forth that we have on our website. So I think Danielle and everybody at EEC has a good idea about what we're interested in. For example, we talked for a while about the whole advocating for our right to practice. So they're keeping their ears open also if they hear anything like in committees or wherever about that, so that we can be alerted, which is wonderful. We haven't really had that before. But mostly the task will be, they're going to be monitoring it though, and letting us know, where we can engage and how we can engage. I don't mean for this to be a heavy lift. I think some people are going to be interested in this, and some people may not be. I'm excited because we can really be aware of what's going on. And as Danielle was saying, if there's something in there where this one sentence can really impact what we do or what we care about, then we can, as in the past, we can sign on to a letter of support or sign on to a letter of not supporting something or asking for a change. And so many times we don't have to initiate and do all of it ourselves. This is where during our task forces meetings, it's come up that we want to engage, collaborate, communicate, and educate. And so many opportunities in that regard here. So I'm excited about that. And we'll figure out where people want to, chime in and participate in that. Anything else, Danielle, that I should have said or include? I can't think of anything else. But that's what EEC is going to be doing with us, and they would help us also if we do want to write a letter ourselves, or we do want to go and what they call it is testify at one of these committee hearings, because we've done that before a couple of times that I know of, and they help us with the dialogue, what we need to say or not say. And then Danielle's going to go forward and talk some about ways that we can engage. So that's it for me.
Perfect. So as Cheryl mentioned, what we're really going to try to do is identify 5 to 10 bills that you all care about. We'll be able to, identify, are you supportive of it as it is? Do we like it? Do we just want to keep supporting of it? Is there, an amendment we want to make? Do we want to change it a little bit? As long as it's not a huge heavy lift. Do we not like it? Should we actually maybe oppose it? Should we, try to figure out what to do there? So as those 5 to 10 bills go through the process, we'll be letting Cheryl know, hey, this bill is going to be heard in Assembly Natural Resources and Water Committee on this date. If you want to submit a support letter because you say you like it, you need to do it by this date. This is where you need to send it. This is kind of how you write that letter. If you want to testify, again, it's going to be heard on this date. Here's how you call in to leave public comments. We'll kind of monitor the bills, let you guys know just where it's at, and then where those points of influence are, and where you can actually engage and how to do so. So we'll be helping you all kind of understand that and kind of walking you through that process. That being said, I know it sounds overwhelming and like a lot that we're asking you to do, or that Cheryl might be asking you to do. Really, I think there's only a few things that we hope are, somewhat easy and fun activities that you can engage in throughout the year. One will be meet and greets with your legislators. So I'm sure some of you know your assembly member or senator, maybe not. So it'd be great to just start building those relationships, to start getting to know them, so that if and when you say, hey, I need your help, I need you to vote for this bill, or I need you to help me change it, it's easier for you to do that down the line. So that's one way to, just get to know your legislators. People do it all the time. It's not scary. Everyone's able to do this. It's quite easy, and they like hearing from their constituents. So hopefully not a big ask of you all. The next would obviously be actual advocacy meetings. So once you get to know your members, then, we can help you identify, what are the things APLD cares about, equip you with some talking points, and, specifically what do you need? What do you want to ask your legislator to do? And then you can reach back out to those members and say, hey, I like this bill. It's going to be heard in your committee on this date. Can you please vote yes on it? You know me, remember me, you like what I do. Please vote in favor of this bill. The third is the letters that Cheryl and I spoke about. So as a bill gets referred to committee, the public is able to actually submit formal letters to the committee saying, we like or don't like this bill. Here's why we want you to vote yes or no. It's more of kind of a formal process for you to actually get your position out to the entire committee, not just your assembly member or legislator. So we can actually help you understand how to submit those letters, where it goes to, what those typically look like, what the timeline for that is, what the deadlines are. So that's something that, maybe you yourself won't do, but some subset of APLD might want to engage in throughout the year. And then last is emails and calls to your legislative offices. So especially for a lot of bills that might be a little controversial, maybe something like a funding bill where there tends to be, some controversy around whether or not we want to fund that bill. Especially for those bills where votes we're not sure where it'll pass. It is helpful a lot of times the day of a vote to call or email your legislator and say, hey, I live in your district. Remember me, please vote yes for this bill. It's going to be heard here, on this date. And they have to actually tally those up. They have to take that information from their constituents And, ideally they factor that into their voting decision. So those are kind of call to actions, I think they're called a lot of times, that we might ask you to do throughout the year. So how do you actually do this, and how do you do it well? Obviously, I think, or from what I've heard, maybe a lot of you haven't engaged in this work in the past. It can seem very overwhelming. A lot of us have, trainings like me to do this. They have years of experience, but there are just a lot of simple things you can do. A lot of them, second nature, hopefully, but a lot of them, maybe you haven't thought about to actually be effective, come to those meetings and do that work in a way that makes them want to listen to you and makes them want to, trust and understand what you're saying. So very basic, know who your senator and assembly member are. You all have one of each. So know who they are and know what they care about. Google them, look at the committees that they're on, understand what they're interested in. There are, if you don't have that much time and you only want to make one phone call, that'll help you decide which one's probably going to make more of an impact. There are some members who are never going to vote for something you care about. So if you don't have time to call them and you have, someone else you can call, that'll help you decide which one you really want to target your energy towards. Know the Capitol and district staff for your representatives. Most likely, until you get to know the offices, you're not going to be able to talk directly to your legislator, or at least advocate for them. Meet and greet, you might be able to get a meeting with a legislator, but most likely you're going to go through staff. I go through staff most of the time. So get to know who they are. Get their cell phone numbers. Make sure that they like you. It is a pandemic right now, so almost everything is virtual. So this has made my job much harder. It's kind of changed my job a lot. It is much more difficult to get a direct line to someone unless you have their cell phone number. So get to know them in a way where they want to interact with you, and that hopefully they share direct numbers with you. So during the next year, sorry, go ahead.
I have a question. So because the last time we had a training with you, maybe that was 2 years ago, I found it interesting because when we were going to walk the halls and meet with some people that you had helped us set up appointments with, it was interesting because we studied who the legislators were ahead of time. You had provided us with information, and like on their web pages, there's information about their interests and all. I found that very interesting. The other thing that I was going to say is, I think that if we get into one of these or something, that it would be helpful. We'd be able to say to you, okay, we're thinking about this. Is this person care?
Yeah.
Or should we pass that person and go on to someone else?
Yeah, we can definitely help you with that. We interact with the offices all the time, so we can definitely help you better use your time and be better informed when you're actually doing the outreach.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So during the next year, I would encourage you all to meet with your representative. So meet with your assembly member, meet with your senator. And if possible, go to a virtual political event or office hours. A lot of times that's the way that you can actually interact directly with a member. And, a lot of these things are, open to the public. And by that now, I mean, these virtual events are open to the public. So a lot of members actually host things like office hours where you can actually meet the member, hear about what they care about. They can hear about what you care about. And it's more of a, casual way to get to know them rather than having to set up a formal meeting. Because really, the more they see you, the more they are reminded about what you care about and reminded of who you are, the more likely it is that, they'll be kind of listening to what you say and that those issues will be top of mind when they come up.
Mm-hmm.
So know your elevator pitch, practice it. A lot of times you don't have that much time with a member, you don't have that much time with an office, and Cheryl can attest to this. There's times when we've thought we had half an hour, we only had 3 minutes in a hallway with people walking back and forth. So, know know what you do, know why it's important for that member, what are you doing in their actual district, and know what APLD California is doing and what your priorities are, and be able to really, hone that in and come up with your quick elevator pitch so that you're ready to share it in a concise way whenever there's an opportunity. And then make sure your legislator and staff like you. That seems very obvious, but I'll break it down a little bit more, just because I think there are times when you're busy, or you're talking to a scheduler, and maybe you're not really being as formal or as openly friendly as you might have normally been. There have been people who have been schedulers who are now legislators. So every interaction that you have is incredibly important. So take everyone very seriously. In addition to the fact that a scheduler is the gatekeeper for an office. If they don't like you, they will not let you in. So every single interaction is so important. And a lot of times when you're trying to, call an office the day of a vote to get through, if someone's busy, they're more likely to take your call if they like you, if they know your child's name, if they know, you have a pet bunny. They're more likely to be open to that phone call because they enjoy talking to you and they know, you're coming from a good place. And then be a resource to your representative. I think this is one that you all can, really take advantage of. You all know what you're doing. You're an expert on an issue that a member is most likely not an expert on, but is going to need to vote on. So really take advantage of that. Make sure they know, what you're talking about. Anytime, they're confronted with an issue or a bill that they need to vote on, but they don't really know what it's about, be the person they talk to. Let them know that you're there for them, that you can help them understand the issue. That is really, I think, one of your most important roles, is being someone that they call when they have a question. And then be comfortable calling your representatives directly when needed. So this is kind of the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is to have your assembly member and senator's cell phone number, and building that strong relationship with them. And hopefully we can help you get to a point where you do get there. So for meetings, this is kind of just a planning and checklist to help you feel more comfortable actually doing this type of work. Kind of tutorial scheduling meetings, making sure you email and call the scheduler. And we can definitely work with Cheryl to really kind of work through what are the to-dos in order to do this. I'll focus more on kind of preparing for meetings. Again, learn about your legislator. Do not walk into a meeting with a legislator without knowing what their district is, what they care about. Ideally, how they voted on certain issues. There's nothing worse than, going into an office and saying something and that member being like, what? I don't work in that area, or I hate that policy, and then just wall. So know what you're getting into, understand what they care about. Develop your talking points. And what I think is, maybe the one and only good thing that's come out of COVID is everything's virtual, which means you can write it down and they don't see it. You can write down everything you want to say in that meeting. You can write down as comprehensive of notes as you want. You can really prepare. So I think even, especially in the beginning, when you're getting used to this, it's a great way to, slowly work towards, a comfort level where you feel comfortable, maybe not necessarily having to write things out. But I think that's one, great advantage of this virtual world we live in now, is you're able to prepare and you're able to look at your notes while, you're in a meeting. And then collateral. So I think one awesome thing about APLD also is you have really cool pictures. So before and after photos, pictures of beautiful landscapes, it's very, I think, easy to tell your story about what you do in a way that's very appealing. Not everyone can say that. So take advantage of that. Make sure you're sharing, photos, booklets, whatever you have to kind of talk about your issues in a way that's easy to understand. Nobody wants a 20-page document just of words. Members really are drawn to those pretty one-pagers. So take advantage of that, prepare that information, both about, I think, APLD, the work that you're doing, and the priorities that you care about. And then very important, always follow up from your meetings. Make sure you say thank you to the legislator and to the staff. Make sure you get contact information, send any follow-up information, always follow up. It's a great way to just increase your contact with that office. And then lastly, your assignments. So I thought I would just end this with, if you want to start engaging now, here's how you can actually, immediately start doing something that, shouldn't be too difficult. Hopefully there can be some, fun that comes out of it. But essentially, I would encourage you all to start talking to your legislators. So find your senator and assembly member. There's a link here to actually figure out who those people are if you don't know them already. That link will also, you can find out contact information for the district staff so that you can actually schedule a meeting. So schedule these virtual meet and greets. The goal of these initial meetings, if you don't know your legislator already, I always recommend that this not be an advocacy meeting, this be a meet and greet meeting. You don't want your first time talking to a legislator to be one where you're saying, help, I need you to do this. You want it to be a friendly, get to know me, get to know what I do. You always kind of want to start there, which is why these meet and greets are so important, because if down the line you want to do some advocacy, you don't want to start there. You always want to start with like a nice meet and greet. So schedule those meetings, talk about what you do in the district. That's really important. They obviously care about a lot of issues, but if you don't talk about what you're actually doing in their district, they might not necessarily care. Or they might not, be as attentive as they might normally be. So just make sure you can actually say not only why what you care about and what you do is important overall, but why does it matter to them? Why does it actually trickle down to their district, or what specifically do you do in the district? Again, follow up with materials, whatever it might be. And then at that point, I would say around a month later, which I think would time well with when you guys will probably want to start doing advocacy, you can then follow up with, hey, I want to talk to you about this bill, and actually, talk to them about your policy issues, maybe make a request, say, can you vote on this bill, or what is your position on this bill, whatever it might be. So that's kind of just a general, if you want to start engaging, here's an easy way to, start teeing that up. And with that,
we're going to have question and answer time now. That's great. And well, that's a lot. Very well laid out, I think, Danielle. And I kept, oh, look at there. We've got some claps going on. And what I kept thinking about is the work that the task force is doing, working on what the priorities are, and all of that is going to dovetail beautifully, because it will help us decide where we can focus attention on the bills and the legislation. So it really helps us focus, instead of being real scattered and, oh, that's interesting, that's interesting, because a lot's interesting. But yeah, so I can see it really dovetailing nicely. Let's see. So I want to open this up, though, for questions that you might have. And I'd see, I'd like Kit to talk with us for a minute, back to that question of what the progressives are. hold on a second, Kit. Let me see. Let me read. Because this was about the progressives, whether they're to the left or to the right. And she's involved with El Dorado County progressives. So mute, do you want to unmute yourself,
I
Kit,
did.
and your camera for a minute and talk with us about that?
Oh, I'm not undoing the camera, sorry.
Okay, don't undo the camera, just your voice. Thank you. That's right, you were gardening. Okay, go.
Yeah. So anyway, progressives are definitely to the left. They're not more conservative than the standard Democrat at all, which would be, that would be moving towards the right. And so they're not to the right. We're definitely to the left of that, looking for, as the word says, more progressive types approaches, say healthcare for all, that kind of thing. So yeah, so just as a definition, we're definitely to the left.
And it doesn't matter whether it's the Democrats are to the left or the right, or more to the right of center, or the Republicans are to the left or right of center.
Yeah, if you were a Republican that was tending more towards a Democratic side, you would be left of center.
Right.
The quote unquote radical right would be considered more to the right yet and people could call it radical Dems would definitely be to the left. So it's going off the other way on both ends. From center.
Interesting.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying. I apologize. I use different, I guess I might use different terminology. I think in what I do, moderates is typically what we use for that sort of definition. But I think, yeah, I'm using two terms for maybe two different worlds. So apologies, and thank you for the clarification, Kit.
That's okay, thank you.
That's good. Okay. And I see Marcia. So what she's saying is we are all in different areas of the state. Should each of us learn, meet our senator and assemblyman? And I would say yes. And there's the link on the page here. Find your rep at the top of the page. And I do have this slide deck, and Danielle, I can share this with people, right?
Yeah.
And then we'll have the recording as well. But yes, I think that it would be great to find out who your local people are. And the other thing is, you were explaining this, Danielle, what came to mind for me is it makes it seem more approachable on that more local level, because you are in those communities. We are doing work in those communities, just making that more personal. It made me kind of nervous when you were saying, that we need them to like us. I'm like, oh my gosh, how do I get somebody to like me? It just sounded so, I don't know, soft.
At least get them to not hate you. I think the advantage of this organization is that you are statewide and you do have a very large membership. So you collectively can do a lot, but you also tell a story that is both local and statewide. And there's a lot of organizations that are only regional or that work on issues that it's not easy to translate it to everyone, and not everyone, necessarily cares about it. It's so specific, but you have a big membership, you work across the state, you work on very specific projects in districts, but you also have, larger issues that cover the entire state. So it's really great that, each of your members can meet with your legislators. So you're able to, get to certain members when you need to, but you also have a story that every member should care about, and that, you can tell every member. So I think, your organization is a really great one to be able to do this work. You don't have a lot of the barriers that others might have to make an impact.
Right. Francesca, would you like to share your experience that you put into the chat?
Sure. Let's see. So my representatives have newsletters, And so I make sure that I subscribe to their newsletters so that I know what they're up to. They also have Facebook pages. You can become friends on Facebook. But one of my, just as an example, my assemblyman, mine is Adrina Zarian. He's in the past, before COVID, sponsored nature hikes. So I went on one or two of those and was able to just grab his ear in a very casual, relaxed atmosphere. And so that's one of the things, like if you see their newsletters and see they're doing something like that, you can, try and attend one of those events just to get to know them. And then the next time when you want something, then they at least have that initial, recognition of you.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great point. And I think a lot of times when it's not like part of your normal life that you're engaging with legislators, it can seem very scary. It can seem, like there are these shadowy figures that don't seem like real humans, but they really are. And so I would definitely say don't be afraid of them. Definitely go to these casual experiences with them where you can just build even personal relationships with them, because that's what's really going to matter. And that's how you then, start wading into talking to them about policy. But I think I would just really emphasize, they're all, for the most part, wonderful people, and they are easy to talk to, and they care about things, and they're, a lot more similar to us than we might think, because they seem so powerful and untouchable.
Mhm. Yeah, that's good. Is there how many of people that are on in this meeting already know who your assembly members are, or senators, or do you know them?
I certainly know who mine are, and I also get their newsletters and occasionally follow their Facebook pages. But as we well know, Cheryl, we're in the same district. Ours are very, very, very conservative.
Yeah.
So I have never personally met them, but I do follow what they're up to.
Okay, great.
And so I asked that question in the messaging, knowing that, and that they're relatively known for being anti-environmental on almost anything. How do we deal with that when we know that our representatives are not going to probably be at all friendly towards
Good question. Yeah, how do we deal with that?
Yeah. So, that's something I have to deal with every day. But I think that the advantage that we have here in California is that we are changing a lot quicker. And I think we're realizing that when we talk about environment, we're not just talking about, cute little bear and nice green, pretty, trees. We're talking about everything that comes around that. So we're talking about social justice issues and making the outdoors available to everyone. We're talking about pollution that's harming people. We're talking about opportunities for workforce employment and building, labor, which is something that, some of those maybe Republican members, that's their bread and butter. They need jobs for people. They need economic, especially now, recovery, but, even just stability. So the work that you guys are doing, it's a field where people are employed. It gives people jobs. And, ultimately, we want more people trained to be able to do that type of work and create opportunities for that, to create more jobs for people and create, stimulus in the economy in those local areas. So it's all about really just crafting a story and, remembering that it's not just the typical, environmental issues. It's a lot broader than that. And I think the fortunate thing is that story's starting to be told. But, that doesn't speak to some of the members that I won't name that, just aren't going to care ever. And in those instances, it's really, just talk to them, try to get them to understand their issues. Hopefully they won't be rude to you, and just, keep trying, and maybe one day they'll turn the tide. And if not, that sometimes you just can't get there.
Well, Danielle, here's one way, and that bridges something that's very important to us, as well as ties into the environment that they would care about, and that is fire. So we have identified that training in firescaping, that term, relative to landscape design, relative to our environment, relative to soil, that all of that is important to us. And I think that that would be important, you know, kind of in this, we're sliding into these people who may not care about the environment, but everybody, especially in El Dorado County and others where there have been, you know, fires, that that might be a way that we can engage, you know, find something that is important and honestly that they better care about. They should care about. I don't know if that makes any sense, but seems like it's a way.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. Everyone cares about fire right now. Every district is being impacted by fire. So the more we can, you know, encourage activities that help prevent those fires, the better. So definitely a worthwhile talking point, and one that, you know, almost all members care about in some way or another.
Yeah, because as you said, we can be a resource to these people. So I think we can. I don't want to forget, let's see, Deborah said we had our local assemblyman, Paul Koritz, introduce the biodiversity symposium that we had recently. So that's very good. But I don't want to forget, I do know, speaking of events, Sean, would you mind putting in Studio Petrichor's events that you have coming up in the chat so that everybody can see those? That would be great. We have a very, Danielle, we have a very, very active and diverse chapter. It's really wonderful. And Studio Petrichor has been doing a lot of good training, outreach, hands-on workshops and so forth. Who else wants to talk here? We've got time for more questions. Anything that has come to mind? Any questions? Anything?
So I'm seeing a question in the chat box just about how to find bills. I will include a link that is hopefully more helpful than just looking up bills via the website. So through this website, you can actually filter by author, so legislator. You can also type bills in by name so that you can, you know, hope that's a publicly accessible way to at least find bills, although it's not a way to actually, you know, use the information in a way to understand everything that's going on, but at least you can find bills.
Okay. Yeah, I like it that people have already started looking them up. Have I missed any questions? Wait, there's a new message. Mary, do you want to unmute yourself and talk about this?
Sure. I'm not going to unvideo though.
All right.
If you don't mind. I'm just curious. I think that's a really interesting point. I'm in Berkeley, so I don't think I'm going to run into this, but you never know. How and what other kinds of overlap might there be with what we do as landscape designers? The fire was such a great example, firescaping. Is this APLD committee looking at what other topics might be kind of a gateway into districts where they're more right wing, and I don't know if that's the right term, but less open to environmental change, politicians or leadership? And so I'm just curious what our group can do to help others who are in part of the state that might have more recalcitrant thinkers in leadership position.
I think that drought is one. That's something that's impacting, you know, everyone, and it's going to continue to impact everyone. So, you know, similarly to fire, making sure that we're doing things on the ground that can help us prevent drought, or at least, you know, not make it worse. Jobs, again, workforce training is something that Republicans are very interested in now more than ever.
What does that mean, workhorse training?
Workforce training.
Oh, workforce.
Yeah.
What's a
Maybe that too.
workforce?
I don't know. I've never talked to them about that.
Danielle, I have a question. I'm not sure if you can hear me.
I can hear
This is
you.
Magda. Okay, great. There was a bill that was going through the assembly, and I believe that it passed, that was going to be allocating funding for homeowners to assist them in brush clearance. And I don't know that I was really trying to find that bill, but I also understand that due to COVID, those funds are no longer available. But I was trying to find out what the number of that bill was in order to find out if and when there might be funding for that so that I could relate that information to my clients.
Yeah, I think that's a Stern bill. I think that was like defensible space and home hardening. I know he has the same bill. I might be thinking about a different one because I know he reintroduced a similar bill this year.
Oh, right.
So I can look into that and see which one it is.
Oh, that would be great. I really appreciate that.
I didn't work very specifically on the issue last year because of COVID and because, you know, they had to pull back a lot of bills. So I can't speak to the budget, but what I can say is a lot of programs who were expecting to see funding this past year, especially through cap and trade, so greenhouse gas reduction funds, who had already been starting to set up those programs, had to pull back because the legislature and governor didn't release any of those funds last year. No GGRF dollars went out. So there are several instances of funding and then the programs that would have been funded who were kind of already gearing up, writing guidelines, even releasing solicitations or preparing for releasing solicitations, who had to say, oh, wait, never mind, we don't have any money. Hopefully we'll get some now this year. So it wouldn't surprise me if what you're talking about didn't ultimately get funding, but hopefully some of that we'll be able to get funding to those programs this year because our GGRF revenue is, you know, stabilizing and our tax projections are higher than expected. So, you know, hopefully we'll see more money come out to both make sure we're good this year, but hopefully to make up for last year as well.
Oh, thank you so much, Danielle. That's great because we're starting a fire council in our neighborhood because we are directly next to a WUI, you know, the Wildland Urban Interface. Yeah. And so as part of that, we're, as I say, starting a fire council in our neighborhood, but also for the surrounding areas. So it's just the way of kind of, I'd like to disseminate that information so that people know who, you know, might not necessarily be able to afford, you know, the brush clearance, that, you know, that I could give them an update and say, hey, you know, help is on the way, kind of thing.
Is this Magda talking? Is this Magda?
Yes. Yes,
I was just going to add that I'm in Cool and we have a fire safe council as well. And I know that they have been applying for grants to get that transitional zone. We have some Bureau of Land Management lands around us. So they've been, you know, looking at that too. So you might check into that, your council, as you go. I'm sorry, Danielle, though, you were about to say something and we have like a minute left.
Oh no, yeah, I was just gonna, I'll look into that, Magda, and then I'll send the information to Cheryl so she can share it with you.
Excellent. Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Yeah,
of course.
Great. Any last thoughts? I really want to thank everybody for joining us. We had 28 people here with us today, so that's great. I will be sharing, you know, we'll have the recording that I can get the link to everybody. I think, Danielle, you record the chat or you get a record of the chat as well, because I think there were some resources in there. It usually comes automatically, but
okay.
So we can share that and be looking for other announcements and information coming out to everybody about advocacy and sustainability. Does anybody who's on the task force want to say anything before we close? Or anybody else, actually?
Thank
I
you,
would love
guys.
to just thank you for both Danielle and Cheryl for putting this together. This is very, you know, even if some things are repetitive, they seem to get lost in our brains as time goes by. So it's to get a refresher is wonderful, and to get new information is wonderful. So thank you very much.
Yes,
You're
thank you
welcome.
very much.
Great. You're
Yes,
so
it was
welcome.
very
Thank you for
useful.
the California chapter's support for us to be able to continue to work with EEC. I think, and you know, Martine is on the task force, and Francesca and many others on this Zoom meeting. So Martine, I didn't know if you wanted to add anything as we close.
No, I just thank you so much for all of this information. This was really, really useful. Thank you, and for putting it together.
You're welcome. All right, everybody. Well, I'm going to close. I want to thank Danielle. You've been fabulous to work with. She has just been great, and your staff there. So thanks again, and we'll sign off, and I'll stop the recording.
Thank you all so much. It was such a pleasure to see some of you again.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.